storms coming all the way from the east coast of Africa still happens occasionally, but we also see a big surge in storms closer to the Caribbean or the Gulf for their starting points, and that's exactly what we have going on in this case. Traditional tracks north into the Gulf or across Florida, again similar to this one, not out of the question. We'll be right back.
Currently in our area, 64 degrees under partly cloudy skies. Today, some clouds this morning will give way to generally sunny skies for the afternoon. Slight chance of a rain shower. High 73. Tonight, mainly clear. Thursday, afternoon showers. Thunder possible. High 65. Chance of rain 50%. Here's our 7-day outlook.
Right now on Weather Center Live, Tropical Depression 16 has formed. It could, if not likely, will impact the Gulf Coast. We'll show you who's at risk and time it out for you hour by hour.
Plus, Florida getting hit with rough surf and dangerous rip currents. And that is not all. System hovering over the eastern states, bringing a bit of rain. Some places could see up to 5 inches of it for the day. How long it's going to be sticking around, we'll tell you next on Weather Center Live. Well, hi there and welcome to Weather Center Live. I'm meteorologist Alex Wallace.
And I'm meteorologist Mark Elliott. We are going to focus in on Florida today. Flooding, a big potential, as well as dangerous waves and rip currents. We'll get to that, though, because for now, the big story is away from Florida just a bit. A new tropical depression has formed in the Caribbean.
Yep, that is Tropical Depression 16. As we take a live look at Playa del Carmen there, it looks like almost a little bit of rain has moved on through here. Some wet pavement on the streets, but folks are getting out and about. Maybe it's come to an end. Going to be looking a bit wetter here over the coming days as this new depression gets closer and closer here over the next few days.
Let's bring in Hurricane Specialist Carl Parker, who is monitoring this storm. Carl, at least in the short term, we should have some strengthening to this.
Yeah, that's right. And, you know, this is something that's been showing up in the modeling for a while now, albeit not quite as quickly as this. And yes, it's going to be out over very warm water. There is no wind shear to speak of. And so really the only question in terms of intensity in the next, say, 24 to 48 hours is going to be how much interaction with land we see there in Central America. And you're looking at the latest on the storm, just named Tropical Depression at the top of the hour and last hour, and moving to the northwest now at 7 miles per hour. So on track to either come right over or very close to the coasts of Nicaragua and Honduras, and then beyond that into the western Caribbean, very close or right over the northeast part of Mexico. That is Cancun there, Cozumel, that area, and then out into the Gulf of Mexico. And you've got exceptionally warm water all the way through these areas. So in terms of water temperature, there's nothing to hold it back. The wind shear is expected to be very light until the very last, until it gets closer to the U.S. And in fact, some of the modeling suggesting that the wind shear is dramatically going to increase by late Saturday and early Sunday, right as the storm would be coming on shore. So there could be some implications in terms of intensity there as well. I want to show you the latest run of the European model. We're looking at the low-level spin, which is right there, and we can follow it as it comes into Nicaragua and Honduras, then back out into the Caribbean, and then up into the Gulf and towards northwestern Florida. Now, in this scenario, if it were to happen like this and it were to strengthen to a hurricane before it comes into northwest Florida, one of our bigger concerns would be the amount of surge that we could see there in that coastal bend, the Big Bend area of northwest Florida. That is one of the most susceptible areas to storm surge flooding in the entire nation. And so if it came in just like that, even as a Category 1 hurricane, that could be very, very serious in terms of storm surge flooding. So that's something we're going to be watching. This developed along an area of converging winds coming out of different directions. It's called the monsoon trough. This is a typical birthplace of tropical systems. You can see the thunderstorms there about that spin in the atmosphere. And again, there's really nothing in the way of wind shear right now. And so the question is just how much land interaction are we going to see? Certainly tropical storm force winds are possible in coastal areas of Nicaragua and Honduras. And we're looking also at the potential for very heavy rain, and there's a lot of mountainous terrain in Central America, and so landslides, mudslides, flash flooding will be significant concerns over the next couple of days in many parts of Central America. Alex, over to you.
All right, thanks, Carl. Meanwhile, we head up to Miami, checking in on things here, and a couple of folks there looks like straggling there on the beach. Notice there as you look at the waters there, a little bit on the choppy side. That seems to have been the case here over the last several days, weeks in fact. We've seen a couple of tropical systems move up the East Coast. That's left things a bit on the rough side with the surf, and once again, we've got more issues here as a persistent flow coming in out of the east continues to bring us a few showers, but also some problems there right along the coast. Miami, you'll have the chance for more rain showers and storms over the coming days. You see the forecast here, getting into your weekend, becomes a bit more hit and miss here for us for your Friday into Saturday, but nonetheless, the chance for some rain does exist. Right now, where we've got it, you can see streaming on in from the east. We've seen a few of those showers move through Miami, down around the Keys as well. The Bahamas seeing some wet weather also, thanks to this tropical wave, which is moving its way on through. That wave bringing with it quite a bit of that tropical moisture. So as that continues to stream across the state, that's going to mean more rain showers as well as storms. So here's how today plays out. Mostly looking at the rain showers concentrated to the southeastern part of the state, but notice how that now expands to just north of that Interstate 4 corridor, Orlando to Tampa seeing that. And then as we move into your Friday, we're looking up towards the Panhandle, seeing some scattered showers as well as storms. So each and every day we expand the aerial coverage of who's going to see the rain showers and storms. And then as we get towards the weekend, now we'll have to be looking at what's happening with Tropical Depression number 16 as it moves its way up into the Gulf and the potential impacts there across Florida. But for the next few, going through at least your Friday, the heavier rain shear mark along the southeast coast where we could be looking at anywhere from 3 to 5 inches of rain out there.
Yeah, and unfortunately, because of what will likely then be Nate entering the Gulf of Mexico, the coastal impacts that we've been seeing across Florida will largely get worse. That onshore flow will be enhanced with the storm system moving into the Gulf of Mexico and potentially towards the Panhandle. That means onshore flow continuing into, say, northeast Florida, where there are coastal flood warnings in place. We've already seen impacts along the rivers and from the ocean because of this onshore flow. High pressure over the mid-Atlantic stretching into the northern portions of the Atlantic Ocean has given us this persistent onshore flow, high surf, coastal impacts, big waves. I mean, look at these wave heights just off the coast of Florida. We're talking 8 to even 12 footers, not too far from the coastline right now. It also means high rip current risk, so a lot of threats along the coast. And again, these could all be getting worse if indeed we do have an organized tropical system heading into the Gulf of Mexico. Wind no slouch right now in Daytona Beach, wind gusting to 35 miles per hour, so it is a breezy beach day, not to mention that dangerous beach day. And with that threat of flooding, we're talking about the high tide cycles in particular. For risks for the flooding in, say, Jacksonville, 9:30 tonight, as well as about 9:45 or so tomorrow morning for the next 2 high tide cycles. Alex.
All right, well, you know, the road to recovery remains a long one for millions of people in places like Florida, Texas, Puerto Rico, and, of course, the U.S. Virgin Islands. We're going to have the very latest on some of those efforts and whether the forecast will hold up.
Carefully watching the tropics. Welcome back to Weather Center Live as we take a live look at Riviera Maya in Mexico. Not a bad sky right now, but potential for some changes coming up as we go through the next several days here. Starting off Central America, then getting towards the Yucatan and eventually the Gulf of Mexico, all in line for what is currently Tropical Depression 16. But the potential is there for strengthening. We will likely have Nate on our hands before too much longer. Let's take a look at the current stats. This is as of the 11 a.m. advisory from the National Hurricane Center when it was designated Tropical Depression 16. Winds of 35 miles miles per hour, moving northwest at 7. So down here, this is the area of concern, right? Near the southern and western side of the Caribbean. That motion will bring it towards, say, Honduras. There's a lot of mountainous terrain in here. There's the potential that the center will have interaction with land and will have a hard time getting better organized than what it is right now. However, it's also possible that we get a track just off the land and we have nothing but green lights ahead for more strengthening, unfortunately. That's why tropical storm warnings are up for Honduras and Nicaragua. Coastal impacts looking more and more likely. Lots of very heavy rain across Central America. But notice, even with some land interaction, the first look at the track forecast from the National Hurricane Center brings Sunday morning a hurricane somewhere into the Gulf of Mexico states, from, let's say, Louisiana to the Big Bend of Florida. This area of Florida, one of the most storm surge prone areas of the entire nation. So getting a hurricane into that area would be problematic. Right now, no wind shear involved. There is nothing that will break apart these thunderstorms other than the land interaction. There is some shear in the Gulf right now that will be weakening to some degree as the storm approaches. Alex.
All right, thanks, Mark. We'll check in on the middle of the country where we've got the opportunity for some rain over the coming days. A few storms as well. Omaha, Madison, Chicago, all areas in line to see some of this action here over the next couple of days. Right now, a lot of clouds around parts of the Great Lakes streaming back on into the central and southern plains. That's where we actually have some more concentrated rainfall with the storms. You can see tracking across Oklahoma up into Kansas. Rain showers and storms in play. In fact, some of these have led to now some flash flood warnings in place. Getting it a little bit closer. This is now north and west of Tulsa, Osage and Pawnee counties here, including Cleveland, until 12:30. Flash flood warning in effect, and just newly issued here, just off towards the west, closer to 35. A flash flood warning that includes Noble and Payne counties here for you. And look what's getting ready to move on in. More heavy rain, so that certainly is not to bode well for this general area here. Parts of Highway 64 closed down because of flooding being reported there, so not a good situation with ongoing rain. It's just going to worsen things. Here's the setup. Deep trough here in the western part of the country. That's where the cool conditions have been. That's where we've seen a bit of snow. In the east, big ridge building here. We've got a cold front here that's marching its way towards the south and the east. Along that front, showers and a few storms get going here for you as moisture gets pulled north. And then by the latter part of the week, here comes the next system developing, and that'll track its way east, bringing with it more chances for rain showers and storms. So let's play things out, put the radar into future mode. Here's some of the ongoing activity here for us. Moving beyond lunchtime, this will all press towards the east. Kansas City looking pretty wet as we start to make our way back home from work, and then spreading over towards St. Louis. Dinner time now starts to lose a bit of the intensity, but nonetheless some wet conditions around St. Louis, and then overnight into your Thursday morning, more rain around the Texas and Oklahoma panhandles. Tomorrow, more rain showers and storms, maybe pushing a little bit farther north now to include places like Des Moines, Chicago now included in that, better risk for some of that rain. And Friday, storm potential. And Mark, we now introduce a better shot for some stronger storms that could be severe. Isolated, but nonetheless, we'll have to watch out for hail, wind, and a few isolated tornadoes.
And Alex, we're also watching for another stormy day in Florida. Coastal flood advisories and even coastal flood warnings in effect. Lauderdale by the Sea has one of those advisories. We'll show you where else there are impacts coming up.
Oh, there's no power, there's no water, there's no food. We had to leave, and I love that island. I'm so sad.
Thousands of evacuees from Puerto Rico arrived yesterday in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. The island devastated when Hurricane Maria slammed into it last month.
Recovery efforts are still ongoing across the U.S. territory. Yesterday, President Trump visited with officials and toured the ravaged island. Maria, the strongest storm to hit Puerto Rico since back in 1928. Thanks for staying with us here on Weather Center Live. I'm meteorologist Mark Elliott.
And I'm meteorologist Alex Wallace. And, of course, all eyes are on Tropical Depression number 16, just forming this early part of the day there in the western parts of the Caribbean. Now, we take a live look at how things are shaping up there. Cozumel, Mexico. The cruise ships, they are docked People are enjoying their time. Nice blue sky with a few puffy clouds here and there. But this scene could look a lot different as we head on through the coming days.
And you got to hope those cruise industries are carefully watching what is forming to their south right now, because the potential is there for at least a reasonably organized tropical system to be entering the Gulf of Mexico by this weekend. Let's go to hurricane specialist Carl Parker, who's following this as well.
You know, we've been watching something showing up here in the modeling for quite some time now, but the models have really amped up their forecast just within the last 24 hours. First of all, the system itself became a lot more organized in the last 24 hours. And the other thing that we know is that along this journey off to the northwest here, we don't expect to see much holding the system back. There's going to be low wind shear. There's going to be very warm water. One of the big questions is just how much interaction with land will we see in Honduras and Nicaragua, right in there, right along the coast. And that's going to be within the next couple of days here. So right now it's moving to the northwest at 7 miles per hour. This is the forecast track and intensities from the National Hurricane Center, expecting for the storm to indeed come very close to, if not right over, Nicaragua and Honduras, right in there. So again, at that point, there could be some degradation of the storm just because it's very early. It's a young storm. It's a weak storm. And so if it were over land for some time and solidly over land, that could have an impact on the intensity down the road. The converse is true. If it's just offshore, then we're talking about the possibility of it getting even stronger in the longer term. Then it's going to be out over the open water, and we think coming up very near, if not over the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico and out into the Gulf of Mexico. And just about the entire time, there's really not much wind shear. The model's telling us that maybe the wind shear increases along the northern Gulf Coast very late as it is approaching the coast. That would be around 96 hours from now. That could be a time when the wind shear is increasing, and that too could have an impact on the storm. But right now, the Hurricane Center looking for the possibility of a hurricane coming into the northern part of the Gulf of Mexico. And looking at the European model showing you the wind and surface pressure, the European model, by the way, has done an excellent job with the storms this year. And there you see the core of the storm. And do keep in mind that there certainly could be deviation from this between now and Sunday. But what this model is showing us is that the storm comes up into northwest Florida. That's of particular concern there in what is called the Big Bend area of Florida. That's an area that's very, very susceptible to storm surge flooding. And of course, we could be talking about wind and a lot of very heavy rain coming in there as well. So that's kind of where we are right now. And again, a lot to watch here in the coming days. Mark, over to you.
And Carl, another thing that will be problematic with a storm path like that in the Gulf, it means even more onshore flow for the East Coast of Florida, which has already been dealing with impacts without any tropical entity nearby. We've been seeing this kind of elongated area of tropical moisture coming in towards South Florida. That will only increase as we go through the end of the work week here. Thursday into Friday, Fort Lauderdale looking pretty likely to see rain. Could be heavy at times, but we're also still going to see that onshore flow, which means coastal impacts all the way up through Jacksonville, if not through Savannah and Charleston. Here is that elongated area of thunderstorm activity moving across South Florida. It increases our tropical moisture. It does also tie back to what is now TD16. Could be another kind of spoke of rotation that helps that congeal and get organized over the next couple of days. Right now, we've already got showers and storms with that onshore flow. Forecast only increases that further. We're talking about especially South Florida, but all of the peninsula with a chance for at least renegade showers and storms. You see that concentrated area of disturbed weather coming in Thursday overnight. That'll continue through much of the day Thursday. So some heavy rain potential over the next couple of days across Florida. And there are more impacts than just the rain, Alex. We got to talk about the flooding, the wind, the waves. It's all with us now.
It absolutely is, and you can get a picture of that here for you as you look here at Lauderdale by the Sea. This picture of the clouds have gotten a bit more ominous here over the last hour and a half, and look at the seas, choppy indeed, thanks to that easterly wind that continues to drive on in. You can see the palm tree swaying a bit there as well. So it's been gusty, and that in turn has led to wave issues, coastal issues, and that's going to continue to be the case. Coastal flood warnings. We've got a couple of those here for us. Northeastern part of the state, and then you head a little bit farther south of Daytona Beach, down towards Miami. Coastal flood advisories. Again, we've got that persistent wind driving in from the east, helping to pile up some of that water a bit. in some of those low-lying areas, coastal flooding becomes an issue. So this is the setup. Big high to the north. Around that high, we bring in that easterly wind. It helps to bring us a few showers, but again, coastal issues result as well. The high surf being a problem. And again, we talked about the minor coastal flooding and rip current risk remaining a bit of a risk. Watch out for some of those wave heights. They're on the increase, 5, 10, close to 10 feet, maybe even a little bit more than that offshore. But nonetheless, for boating interests, got to be careful heading out to sea. And then for those trying to get out into the water along the beach, we've got the rip current risk, moderate in nature here from basically South Carolina, and then we get into some zones of even a high risk that we're contending with as well. Watch out for the tide cycle as well. Looks like we'll be reaching high tide around Jacksonville this evening, closer towards 9:30 or so, and then once again heading into Thursday morning. Mark?
Before heading to the beach, you'll want to hear more about the coastal threats in Florida. Al Sandrick is with the National Weather Service in Jacksonville, joining us live to talk about these threats. Al, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, good morning, Mark. Thank you for having us.
Our pleasure to have you, for sure. Besides coastal flooding, which I know is part of the concern, what are you watching with this kind of setup?
Well, what we're really concerned about right now is the St. Johns River. We've got a very complex system, and honestly, I've been forecasting this river for 22 years, and it's taught me a few things over the last couple of days. We have a lot of rainfall that got into the river that's risen, brought the river up a little bit. Then we have trapped tides that are being blown in by the northeasterly winds, and that's still giving us flooding in the San Marco area that suffered so heavily during Hurricane Irma.
Is that, you said that was kind of a surprise, that something you were learning. Is that the area of biggest concern at this point?
Right. You know, it's not a surprise that the San Marco area is flooding. We definitely expected that. What we didn't expect is as much fresh water as there is in the system. The system is normally brackish, but there's so much water that has got into the St. Johns River from the rainfall from Irma and the nor'easter that we had last weekend that we have a skim of fresh water across the top of it. So that's something new to us.
Absolutely. We have about 20 seconds left or so, but if people are visiting the area and are going to the beaches, anything you want them to know?
Definitely follow the advice of lifeguards and pay attention to the tropical depression. We're certainly concerned about that cone of uncertainty. Any track further to the east, and we may have some significant impacts, again, especially along the St. Johns River.
Right, here we go again with another storm entering the Gulf, a potential onshore flow for you that will only enhance the problems that you've been seeing, correct?
That is correct, and the southerly winds blow the river into downtown Jacksonville. So if we start with high water levels, there's certainly a situation where we might not see Irma level flooding, but we see significant flooding in downtown Jacksonville.
All right, Al, thanks so much for joining us. More updates on that storm coming up. Right now, we're taking a look at both the Northeast Corridor, where it's going to be unusually warm for the next couple of days, as well as Garden City, Utah, because honestly, I can't see that video enough.
It is beautiful.
Unbelievable colors. I've never really wanted to own a drone until I saw images like this.
That'll make you do it. Yeah, that is really nice stuff. Gets you into the fall spirit. But as you look at as you mentioned, the Northeast, where those temperatures are not so fall-like, it's kind of weird to see some leaves changing as you're out there in short sleeves and even shorts.
Nothing says looking at the fall foliage like temperatures the mid to upper 70s in the morning in Buffalo, right? On your way to close to 80 in most of the Northeast Corridor.
Yeah, I mean, when you're talking 10 to 20 degrees above average, that puts you into that range. And again, we're not talking about places like Atlanta bean that above average. I mean, we're talking Bangor, Portland, Caribou, these areas, all these spots way, way above your average, not feeling very fall-like.
Yeah, Buffalo and Burlington, both 77 for your high temps today. Boston near 80. The northern side of the Northeast gets a little bit of relief over the next couple of days. But, I mean, D.C., mid to upper 80s for you.
Yeah, that is a really warm time in D.C. But as I mentioned, the colors are starting to change in some of these spots. I mean, we've got a few areas that are peak, getting close to past peak.
Unbelievable.
Crazy.
And those warm days and cool nights are important for the leaves changing. Let's get an update about that with Jim Cantori.
Why do these leaves change their color this time of the year? Well, to do this and talk about it, we've got to grow a tree right here in the studio. Let's do it. Oh, yeah, look at that. huge maple tree. And growing up in Vermont, maples are one of my favorites. They have hundreds of varieties. When they all change at once, it looks absolutely magnificent, and that's why you get those beautiful pictures coming out of Vermont. But right now, this is in summer foliage. Okay, you've got chlorophyll dominating the leaf color. And the process that we know as photosynthesis is what creates that chlorophyll. The process is when sunlight, water, and carbon dioxide, which is what trees inhale, by the way, create sugars and give the tree energy. Now, a byproduct of this, of course, when you inhale, there's an exhale, and the trees actually exhale oxygen. 21% of the air that we breathe are actually coming from these beautiful trees. All right, with less daylight, guess what happens as we get to June 22nd? We start to lose those daylight minutes, all right, and eventually hours, right? The chlorophyll production starts to break down. You kind of notice this a little bit if you drive the landscape a little bit. You see the dark green turn into a more chartreuse color. There's a little yellow mixing in, and that is when the leaf begins to show its true color, okay? And the colors of the leaves, of course, depend on the type of pigments that are found in the leaves. So let's talk about three of these, which are really important. The xanthophylls are responsible for the bright yellow colors that we see. We found, though, a lot of this in corn and also in the yolk of an egg. Now, if this was a maple tree in the landscape in New England, it would more than likely be a silver maple. Silver maple have a lot of this type of material in it. Now, carotenoids produce the more orange color that we see. Think about a carrot or a squash. Anthocyanins is the third thing that we want to talk about, the third pigment here. Think about apples or red wine. So if we take a beautiful red maple here and in beautiful fall splendor, you think, oh, wow, this is perfect. Perfect fall color with this thing. But sometimes the colors aren't so perfect. They're a little bit more muted, or the colors don't last as long. That's all because the weather plays a key role in how we get to the color show. All right? The combination of warm, sunny days and cool, crisp nights actually allows for the effective breakdown of sugar production that gives us the brilliant colors. I really think we need about 30 days of this warm, sunny weather, cool at night, to really break this down. Now, eventually, the veins that carry the fluids in and out of the leaf actually close off. The leaves fall to the ground, sometimes in full color too, and they come to rest around the base of the tree. And believe it or not, those break down. They restock the soil with nutrients, and voila, in the spring, the buds come out, and the tree starts the cycle all over again.
Yeah, the argument is that it's actually relatively beneficial not to rake up the leaves. They form whole ecosystems on the ground and replenish the nutrients. So, hey, get out of some fall work. Not too bad.
I like that.
Yeah.
Back in just a bit. Here we are checking in on Cancun, Mexico. Things calm, things tranquil, things looking pretty nice for any vacationers right now. But that could be a different story in the coming days as we are following a new tropical depression. That is number 16, developing there in the western parts of the Caribbean. And in the near term, as we bring in our hurricane specialist, Carl Parker, we've got Central America that's going to be involved, Nicaragua and Honduras. And that's going to be a big player on what happens down the line with this thing.
Yeah, it certainly is. How much land interaction are we going to see? And, you know, all this kind of ramped up a lot more quickly than had the models been suggesting. You know, we knew that something was likely to happen, but it all happened quite quickly in the last 24 hours. So right now, you've got a system that is moving northwest at 7 miles per hour, should continue along that path. Now, if it does deviate a little more to the west and more solidly over Honduras and Nicaragua, that could have implications for the intensity down the road, as could a deviation to the east and being out more over the open water. Then beyond that, it's mostly going to be over very warm water in a low shear environment. The shear may increase at the very last minute, right as the system is getting closer to shore. But right now, the best available evidence suggests that it could be a hurricane as it comes into the northern Gulf Coast, and that's likely to be earlier on Sunday, though there too there could still be some deviation in that forecast.
All right, so again, we're going to be watching very closely 24, 36 hours what happens there, Nicaragua, Honduras, then down the line, getting out into the Gulf of Mexico. And you can see the general area here. We're talking essentially from just around Louisiana to Florida.
Yeah, exactly. And this is the European model run from last night. And keep in mind, this is one model run, so there could be a lot of change between now and Sunday. There could be deviation to the west, and there could be deviation to the east. In fact, a lot of the hurricane models are actually farther to the west. This would not be a good scenario for the coastal bend of Florida in particular. That's an area that is really susceptible to storm surge. So that could mean very serious storm surge flooding. But again, this is something that could change dramatically between now and Sunday. But it's meant to give you an idea of how this would happen. And most of that wind would be on the east side of that center of circulation. So there could be wind damage, storm surge flooding, and also a tremendous amount of rain with the storm coming in. And here you see a product that really reflects that uncertainty in terms of the potential tropical storm force winds. Those could actually affect parts of South Florida if we see more of a deviation to the east here, and could be as far west as parts of Louisiana and Mississippi if it's more to the west. And you see the timing maybe coming in as early as late Friday, then into early Saturday. We see it coming up either through the Gulf or perhaps affecting parts of central Florida, and then coming in most likely late Saturday and then into early Sunday. That's the timing of the earliest tropical storm force winds.
And that's a key sort of threshold, because once those set in, preparations need to be done. You're just not going to be able to do anything outside because the winds will be too strong.
Exactly. You got to be ready. And here's a look at the visible satellite picture. You can very clearly see a little twist in the cloud right in there. Whether or not that's the actual low-level center is difficult to tell. That could be a mid-level circulation. But what's interesting is that it does look like it's going to get right into the coast here. So again, because the system is new, because it's still a weaker system, there is some possibility that if it does spend a little more time over land, that could have an impact on what comes out of the other side. But again, if it does stay just sort of right along the coast, we probably won't see much deviation in the ultimate intensity of the storm. And in fact, it could get even stronger. Right now, there's just no wind shear to speak of associated with the system. We don't expect the shear to really kick in until it gets a lot closer to the coast. And as we look at the model intensity guidance, you see that the preponderance of the guidance is actually in tropical storm range, getting up to near hurricane force. So at least that's where it is right now. You'd rather see that than see something like this with a lot of those lines well up in a hurricane force range. But again, here too, we could be looking at some changes before we get closer to that time.
Absolutely. So you got to keep checking back for all the very latest and the updates, and we'll certainly bring that to you back in just a bit.